It was revealed that the mail bomber who lived in his van worked as a DJ at a strip club. Yeah, I heard you the first time when you said lived in his van.
In the wake of the Pittsburgh mass shooting, in the wake of the Pittsburgh mass shooting, an organization sent therapy dogs to comfort the community. The community said thanks, but we'd prefer therapy gun regulation.
The White House lawn was decorated with pumpkins, hay bales, and corn stalks for the children's Halloween party held over the weekend. It was cute. They even set up a maze where kids could run away from ICE agents.
Oh.
It's Halloween. It's supposed to be scary.
President Trump plans to sign an executive order reversing birthright citizenship for babies of non-citizen parents born on U.S. soil. Trump plans to reverse every constitutional right until he's legally allowed to deport Tiffany. Oh.
It's his daughter, not the singer. Georgia gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp was caught on tape expressing fear that residents will exercise their right to vote. He shouldn't worry. Everyone in Georgia has decided to stay home after they heard the word exercise. Oh, have you been there?
President Trump and Melania did not dress in costume for the annual Halloween party at the White House. They did wear their usual disguise of a happy couple.
And finally, tomorrow is Halloween, and there are no shortage of do-it-yourself costumes based on current events. But as a public service, your friends here at the Trump Report want to be the voice of reason and discourage any of you who are considering going out trick-or-treating as Megyn Kelly in blackface. The Trump Report starts now!
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Yes, it is indeed the eve of destruction, or our last show before the midterm elections next Tuesday, which we have a special announcement about next Tuesday's show. When and where to find it, well, the where is here. It's the when. But welcome to the Trump Report. I'm Christian Bladt, joined as always by Chelsea Galicia.
Hello there.
Tamra Brown.
Hi.
And Scott Moore.
Hey, guys.
Scott, you weren't with us last week, but I assume that's because you were just buried under all the latest polling data.
I was.
Yeah.
A lot of polls, an avalanche of polling.
Avalanche of polling,
Yes.
and
Yes.
there's a lot to talk about.
There is.
But we avoided talking about polls last week because we can spout off numbers, but we can't. Well, let me just speak for myself. I can't interpret them. I think the ladies would have done a fine job, but I would have just been like, yeah, 40% like this guy, 38% like the other guy, and 20% don't know. I don't know what that adds up to. Anyway, there's so much to talk about this week, and if you're watching live in the chat, welcome, Storage Yard resident. We appreciate seeing you there. And leave us your comments, questions, concerns, and if you're our biggest fan, make sure you let us know that you're our biggest fan. There's obviously a lot to talk about, as is so often the case when I start thinking about this show towards the end of the week before. What I always think is going to be the thing we talk about ends up being bumped by a bigger, and in this case, more tragic story. But I do want to start with the pipe bomber, and we're able to have a little bit more of a lighthearted take on this because no one did get hurt, which is a relief, because if you had to talk about it seriously, you'd have to brush past the fact that he's a bodybuilder who fancied himself one day, hopefully aspiring to be an exotic dancer. Which tells me that I guess his car was so covered in stickers and memorabilia that he'd covered up the mirrors. So he thought that he had a chance to one day be an exotic dancer. So much to say about him. He appeared in court today. And also we find out that he had a target list. I was going to say an enemy list, but I think a lot of people were this guy's enemy. And I think that where it's interesting to start with this was this story comes out and you start seeing pictures posted online and in the news media of what the packages looked like. And it's like, oh, look, the stamps aren't even canceled. And you get thrown around the term false flag that you hear a lot thanks to Alex Jones, which in and of itself is usually a false flag. Interestingly enough, it's a nice catch-22 that false flag is in and of itself a false flag. And the idea that, well, CNN is pretending that someone sent this to them because they don't like the president and all of that. And I mean, that's where we're at now, is like, that's what the that's how people feel about the news media, is that they're like, well, they're going to make these things up. And I guess when the FBI says, no, we were really investigating this is a real guy. But then when you get the guy, it's like, oh, those stickers, they look too nice. He's down there in South Florida. They would have been faded by the sun. And, and despite the fact that people are like, oh, this guy delivered my pizza. He's effing crazy. And so there's all this evidence. People had posted pictures of his van on Twitter. You see, because if you see that van, one, under no circumstances do you get in it. But two, if it is parked and you feel like you're not going to be stabbed, you will definitely take a picture of it because, I don't know what's going on with this guy. So a little bit to digest there before we talk about it in and of itself. But Tamra, I wanted to start with you about sort of the reaction from, well, some in the media, but mostly Twitter, which I know we don't like to talk about as much here. But there was a very vocal contingent of, this isn't real. This guy looks like he wouldn't try and blow up somebody. What are your thoughts when you realize that that's where a story tends to go these days when something like this breaks?
I think the strangest thing that I heard was somebody, a Republican that I saw posting online, was like, he's not a Trump supporter. They keep saying that he's a Trump supporter, and it's like, how is he not a Trump supporter?
Yeah, his van says he's a Trump supporter.
And he's literally got it written all over the place. Like, I don't know how even Fox News or whatever would spin, oh, he's not even a Trump, how...
Well, Fox News is the no spin zone, but I understand what you're saying. If they were to try and spin it, yeah.
But I was just thinking just now, have you guys, anybody on the panel,
No.
there's a truck that is mostly seen, I haven't seen it myself, but friends are always Instagramming it. It's seen mostly in the valley.
Yeah, around here. I know the one. Yes, I have.
Yeah, and it's got like a big Jesus thing on the back, and it's got like some Bible verses, but it's got a lot of Trump, pro-Trump stuff all over it. And I've been wondering, I'm like, I wonder if anybody's questioning.
Well, he'll be on the show next week. So.
Oh, good.
It's certainly causing more scares. Last night, I was trying to drive across town in the city that I live in, and 20 blocks were shut down because of a suspicious package under a U-Haul truck or something.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody is certainly in real life on the edge, pretty nervous whether or not people want to think it was all a fake thing. But I guess I was also interested in people claiming or disclaiming his association to Trump, and I think that what there is to know is about mostly about the rhetoric. It's like whether you believe he was pro-Trump or not, you see that he was pro-hatred, and that's a close enough association to the Trump brand for me.
Yeah.
By the way, in the chat is Atheist for the Cause, who says, is this a right or left-leaning show? How about we report, you decide. You'll see. You watch for a few more minutes and you tell us, and then we'll know what you think. You've already made a few follow-up posts, so welcome to the show, but we'll address that. Scott, when you hear, obviously, about these bombs, and of course, there's always the relief that they don't go off. Regardless of who they were sent to, obviously it's we can joke all we want about Mike Pence, but we don't want someone to send him a pipe bomb that goes off, or one that doesn't go off, by the way. There's plenty of other things to do with the mail. You can, I don't know, can you register to vote by mail, Chelsea? Would that be a better weapon?
Or send a bunch of postcards.
Yes, well, you could do that. So Scott, when you hear this, what are some of your thoughts about before we talk about the pipe bomber himself?
Well, without the actual pipe bombs being sent themselves, like Chelsea was saying, it's the rhetoric that has been ratcheted up over the past couple years that has allowed some of these people to, when they live in their own bubble, to continue to get more and more enraged.
Feel emboldened.
Exactly, because they feel that when you have a president or a leader of a party or whatever condoning a lot of this, it does lend itself to making people feel, like you said, emboldened, or that might be a little bit mentally unbalanced to think, okay, well, this is perfectly okay to do. And then in regards to the fact of people calling it false flags and whatnot, is the sad truth that also, because we're all in our own little individual bubbles, is that we're basically in a post-factual world now, that facts don't matter anymore. It doesn't matter whatever the president says, or right on down to anybody else. If you're watching Fox News or MSNBC or whatever you watch.
Or if you read the failing New York Times.
You read the failing New York Times or the failing Los Angeles Times. It's very easy to...
That one really is failing. But anyway.
Which I still get the old school paper edition every day. But you do see that it's easy for people to just say whatever they want because we're in a post-fact society and nobody cares because you'll always find people that will agree with you. And however crazy false flag type logic that you have, there's going to be a group of people that are going to believe you. And that's the kind of the scary thing as we move forward, that less and less facts are going to be considered real, and we're going to move into...
We're past facts.
We are post-facts.
And we are in the age of it's whatever you believe.
Believe what you want.
Yep.
I got into a conversation last night with a veteran. He was young, probably like mid-20s, veteran, mixed race. I think he was like half black, half white. Staunch Trump supporter. And I was trying to ask him why he supports Trump. And I led without even touching on any, racist hatred stuff. I was like, you're a veteran. He has not visited service members overseas in the time that he's been president. How do you feel about that? He defended him with this largest grin on his face, and it's just and he had absolutely no facts about anything. He was claiming Trump isn't racist. This is after we continued on, and I'm just like, some people support him with absolute. It's like if you've ever had a friend who is like head over heels in love with somebody, and they're in love with the person that they've created in their mind, not the actual person. That is what people like the guy I was talking to last night are doing.
Ooh, that is very interesting.
Well, it's all very interesting, but also interesting when you peel back a little more about Cesar Sayoc. And usually I don't like to give the names of the people in these stories, but this is like...
Even Chippendales was like, we have nothing to do with him.
Well... I don't know why you'd say even Chippendales. I think it's a fairly respectable establishment. It's no Thunder Down Under. But I would say, yeah, it's like just sort of like right out of an episode of like Criminal Minds or some, one of those procedural shows where you're just like, oh yeah, everything about this guy points to something. But if you know him, you're like, you don't quite put your finger on the fact that this is what would happen. And I mean, look, it's... The enemies list, the target list, whatever you want to call it, is basically right out of all the people that if you are a Trump supporter, you're not going to like any of these people. And he interestingly decided to put a return address from Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office. So in some cases, like in Hillary's case, be like, wait, is this really from Debbie? This pipe bomb? But so I mean, I don't. And now he's saying like, well, there wasn't the intention to have the pipe bombs go off. And which I think is interesting because it's a lot of time and effort to put into making a statement where that doesn't happen. And he faces more
statement.
Well, I don't know what he's had in the way of a statement. That's sort of we don't really know that much about him, and and then we're not privy to a lot of the evidence, And apparently he faces more than 50 years in prison, which that doesn't sound like enough. I mean, it's just like, shouldn't there be like a potential count for attempted manslaughter? Is that what it would be? Or is it attempted murder?
And interstate, using the mail for interstate.
I feel like 50 years for one of the packages, so it should be one of those ones
where...
It's
like a compressive effect the more that you...
Yeah.
Of them that you send out. So
but I mean, look, he's already 56 or whatever, so I mean, already 50 years puts him all over 100, so it's not like it's pretty much a life sentence right there.
Just don't give him his vitamins.
Plus, Whitey Bulger died in prison, got killed in prison. Maybe you never know what happens in the mean cells. The reality of the prison block.
Yeah, prison industrial complex.
Whitey Bulger. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. So as we're talking about, obviously there was the fact that the story then gets replaced by the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, and I mean, this is the third year of doing the show. We've been doing it for like full 2 years. And I mean, there are times where we don't even comment on a shooting because of when it happens, but I don't know how often we have to talk about it. It would be great if it was never. And, as much as you say about it, you're never any closer to not even a solution, just like a discussion of a solution. I think everybody's fairly dug in this issue. Do you think that Chelsea, there's no number where people will be like, all right, enough. We finally have to actually do something. That number should have been what, I don't know, at X number of years ago. I don't even want to put a number on it.
My sense is that nothing has really changed in how people feel or the number of the people that feel whatever that they feel. It's pretty much just dug in at this point, I think is the right term for it. Even some people who I would be surprised to agree with Trump in the opinion that, oh, well, there should have been people in the synagogue with guns on them. I mean, just the idea of you at all times, at all places, have to be that prepared to shoot, to kill. It just is a massive just bummer, like we just can't have or trust that, in this space, you can let your guard down, like physically, emotionally, like in all senses, and just be safe. And that there is no such place that we all agree.
This is
that
why we
can do
can't
that.
have nice things.
Pretty much.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we can't have nice things, but this would certainly be one of them. What were you going to say, Scott?
No, I was going to say basically what you were saying to kind of jump on what Chelsea was saying is the fact that that we have to even think about that is something inherently wrong with our country and our mentality, to think that somehow the president of the United States is saying, oh, if they only had a guard there with a gun.
Which they did.
Which is not the way we should be thinking. It should be the opposite way. Where are the sensible gun laws so that we are not thinking, oh, we should have a guard with a gun, which also would not have stopped anything necessarily. And they always talk about that, and it's the most asinine, ridiculous thing to say, because it does not stop when someone's coming in to do a surprise attack, and you had police officers that were shot at, and it's just it makes it worse to even imagine us being in a Wild West type of lawlessness where everyone's just carrying guns and cross shooting. That doesn't make anything any safer, and when police show up, they don't know who's the actual shooter and who's the victim, and it just is, it's not a healthy environment to be in. It is a sad discourse of this country to think that we've gotten to a point that a president would actually state, oh, if they only had a guard with a gun.
I think the only thing that's changed is that nobody is saying anymore it's too soon to turn this political. It's too soon to come up with solutions. Today is a day of mourning. Like, we just skip over that now anymore, and people just repeat what they believe in.
That's true.
And then they move on. And that's the sad thing. And then everyone moves on. And I do agree with Christian. I don't think that there's anything that's going to happen to actually change anyone's minds unless there's some insane thousands of people in one place, and something crazy that affects maybe a lot of government officials or something. I don't see it changing ever, which is sad.
The synagogue had an armed guard, and I heard an interview, I think it was with a local synagogue, saying like, yeah, in the Jewish, we have security guards at our synagogues. That's something that you're used to. We've always had that. So they had one, and that hasn't changed the NRA defense of, if only we had good guys with guns to beat the bad guys with guns. It's like, well, we had that, and see, it doesn't do anything.
The next
most
move,
stupid thing.
But I think a lot of us, some of us do that with money. You're like, oh, we have money, but it's still not enough. We need
if we
more
had
money.
more money, then we could do this.
Right? And so that's just this false belief that I see a lot of people have when I'm working with people with money. And it's like, oh, well, one gun isn't enough for a good guy to have. The good guy must have two guns. And then every good guy must have one and two guns. And it's probably never going to be enough.
Yeah.
Well, two things. One, it's some degree of devil's advocate to mention, but there was they do unfortunately run together, but there was the recent church shooting where there was somebody overheard it from across the street, and he had a gun, and he was able to take the guy out. So you can have anecdotal evidence like that, but to Scott's point, if, say, I assume Pennsylvania is not a concealed carry state, but just say it was and everybody had one, then when the police show up, then it's like, well, everybody's got a gun. So now you don't really know how to diffuse the situation. But to the other thing, to one of the other points that Scott made, referring to it as a political thing, I think is very important that of course, it is very easy to point to Republicans and the NRA, but I also understand that there was a time when there've been many times when Democrats have been in control of both houses and the White House, and we've also not gotten any kind of comprehensive change. I mean, the Brady bill was like the one thing that I can think of that was any kind of step in a direction, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, several of those provisions have actually been negated or walked back.
Expire.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Allowed to expire. That's what they let
And
out.
the assault
Because
weapons ban
NRA
too. The assault
Yeah.
weapons ban that was in the 90s
Right.
as well.
The NRA contributes to Democrats as well
Well,
as
that's
Republicans.
the point I wanted to make. Yeah, that it's very it's a Washington is a broken problem as
It's a
opposed to
money and politics
Yes.
problem.
Right, money
if
and
we just talk
yes.
about that all day and all night,
every
then maybe
day.
we'll get somewhere. If everybody agrees that that is the fundamental problem, that's if not causing, at least contributing to every other problem that we're having.
Right. And the problem is, yes, you're right, that when Democrats controlled, unfortunately, they were too focused during the recession in 2009 to 2011 that they didn't focus on some of those things, and they could have. And there are red state Democrats that would be more reluctant to support something like the Joe Manchins and those people that would be a little bit more reluctant. But yeah, no, it's definitely. But if you were looking politically, you clearly see that
Sure,
more
yeah,
Republican. it's not like a 50-50 thing.
It's
here.
not a
way
50-50,
more
but it's
extreme on
also
one side
it's
than the
not
other.
it's not a 99-1.
No,
It's
not at all.
definitely just an overall problem. And the last time I checked, the NRA has a lot of money. So we hear about this, and the mayor of Pittsburgh says for President Trump, not to come because it's going to do more harm than good. And you see the amount of protesting there was in the streets. Various groups were organized, but also just people were angry, and some of the things that signs said. And it's rare that you can find bipartisan unity on much of anything, but in not going to Pittsburgh with President Trump, you had support on both sides of the aisles. Republicans and Democrats were just like, no, you go on ahead. We're going to go ahead and not make that trip.
We're like, we'll meet you there.
Yeah,
Just
no,
go
no,
ahead.
we will not meet you there. We're they're saying not to go.
No, I'm
It's
just saying, like, you go and we'll be there.
go
Sure,
ahead.
we'll be
We'll
there.
catch up with you.
Yeah, no problem.
Maybe we'll do dinner next week, Don.
And
So
don't forget, we're all dressed in costume.
Yeah.
right, exactly. So I think that I don't know. It's sort of telling about just where we're at right now. Obviously, that look, people always have this kind of, not always, but as far as I can remember, people always have this sort of deranged hatred in their heart and their minds, and they'll act on it, and you just see this sort of reaction to it, and despite all of this, you still have, and despite the pipe bomb going to media outlets, you have President Trump again doubling down on the media being the enemy of the state. And I know that, Ben Shapiro is probably not somebody that a lot of people on this panel are like, oh, I agree with what he has to say. But that's an issue where I will regularly see people that I know retweeting him. Yes, I'm trying to point out that, I don't follow him, but I do see tweets from him a lot.
I do too.
And this is the thing that he's just like, yeah, he really needs to stop saying this. So this is a very conservative, ardent supporter of, well, the Republican Party, less a Trump supporter than anything. And I think it's more worth bringing out the fact that he's saying this than if, Shepard Smith is telling you to do it, or Anderson Cooper, or, whoever, seem to be voices that you might hear this sort of thing regularly. So I don't know, you definitely feel. It's funny because, not funny, but the term tone deaf just seems tone deaf in this day and age, but there's no better way to say it. It's just like, I mean, at this point, everything that, it's not just President Trump, anybody wants to do, it's pretty much all unchecked. So it's like, yeah, you have a group of screaming people cheering, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to double down on how much they hate the media, and people be chanting CNN sucks, and, they're probably some of the same people who are like, well, that I'm using air quotes for those listening on iTunes, that bomb to CNN was a false flag. So, yeah. And it just, I don't know. There's a lot that when you look at when you just like try and catch up on the news, it just makes you shake your head. But there's less and less that can make you even come close to a smile, So, I don't know where we go from here, and I think that's kind of the point, Unfortunately, this shooting is not the last one we'll be talking about here. I would love that if it were, but let us know in the chat what you think, and if you think that we're just missing the point and there is a solution, please let us know. Obviously, there are comprehensive gun reform ideas out there, but you're not going to get people to sit down and agree on them. I don't know, Chelsea, you feel like fundamentally that's really it? It's like,
no, that's not the. I don't think that's the right approach. The approach is on the money on politics, which then has the impact of allowing common sense gun reform to go through that the majority of Americans believe in and agree with. So just the approach is,
or at least
money in politics.
Government-funded research that we haven't been allowed to do
Right.
for that same reason.
I'm not sure, but in this post-facts, life that we live now, I think even if the numbers were clear as day, people would still spin them in a direction that favors their argument. So I don't know if that would be helpful, although I think 10 years ago it may have been helpful when we still believed in facts. But no, I think now it's really just changing the whole system of how electeds get elected and who they represent.
And I think a secondary thing is toning the rhetoric down. And Donald Trump is incapable of doing that. But it starts at the top. And I was telling some of this today, if he even just came across and just said, look, we need to stop this. I was wrong. I shouldn't even be doing this.
Oh my God, what would happen if he
But
did
I'm
that?
saying, like, it would actually make a lot more Republicans that may have been reluctant and not supporting him
sure.
and other people to feel more comfortable supporting him. It wouldn't take much for him because the bar is set so low. If he would start the dialogue of starting at the top and being like, this is not acceptable anymore. We've gone too far with the rhetoric. And, if we tone down the rhetoric, that's going to help some of these people that live in these bubbles that then hear a person speaking this way and thinking that it's okay to do these heinous acts, and they're desensitized from living in their bubble. But until that rhetoric is toned down, the scary thing is I don't see it getting any better. In fact, I see it continuing to get worse because we're continuing to divide everybody instead of trying to bring them together. And he just cannot help himself. He'll post one tweet, and the next thing you know, he's going on another rally and calling, enemy of the people, talk about how horrible Democrats are. I mean, he just cannot help himself. And he's very toxic. And I think until you see him removed from the Republican Party and they're back in the wilderness again, like the Democrats are now, so they have time to become a real party again and not be the party of Trump, that this toxicity is going to continue. And it's very scary and very sad.
Mm-hmm. He was lamenting today that he gets this tragedy, he gets blamed for it when no previous president has been blamed for shootings that took place under their watch. And it's like, you don't even see the connection.
Right.
Of course, but because previous presidents did not spout hate speech that is in line with what these shooters are doing. So of course they weren't, Republican or Democrat, blamed for these kinds of things.
I would say that even if you can't draw a clear line from Trump inspired this, he's certainly not helping.
No.
Even if it's not like, he was driven to do this by something that he heard Trump say, that tone doesn't help. And again, yes, you go back to the idea that the media is the enemy of the stage when obviously it was that same media is what's responsible for him getting elected in the first place. In the chat, Atheists for the Cause, very vocal this time around. Welcome to I hope that the cause is our cause of the Trump Report here on AfterBuzz TV. But it's sort of echoing the sentiment that you're referring to. The idea of this person doesn't get blaming Trump because there were shootings before and many others that had nothing to do with Trump. And yeah, that's absolutely true. But there is definitely a tonal shift on discourse and things that people feel like people are more comfortable saying things than they were under previous presidents. And I don't cast the blame for everything to him because there's no way to say that this same shooting wouldn't have happened on the same day if President Obama or Hillary Clinton were president. I mean, there's no way to say that because how do you try and analyze why somebody with a real deranged mind does something like that? But that's why we talk about it, And by the way, Atheist for the Cause says, I like you guys so far. So really everything else kind of doesn't matter.
How did you find us?
Yeah, great question,
Yes.
Atheist for the Cause.
Good follow-up question.
And what cause are you at Atheist for? Anyway, Plenty of other things to talk about.
Can I say real
yeah,
quick though?
please.
Trump is in a catch-22 in that, people
Is that
were
a book? Sorry.
people were advising him not to go to Pittsburgh, but if he didn't go, he'd definitely be criticized for that too. So
I definitely
he is
agree with
damned if
that,
he does
yeah.
and damned if he
Right.
doesn't. In that respect, I do think that a solution to that would be, was it the mayor or was it the head of the one of the Jewish organizations who were saying don't come until you denounce white nationalism.
That one wasn't the mayor. The mayor was just come at a different time.
Right.
And then, yes, I believe that.
If he made a public statement just outright denouncing white nationalism, like you were saying, people would everybody would appreciate that.
I don't know if just one statement would be enough. If I were a white nationalist, I'd be like, he's just saying that because people told him
fix
to
everything.
say that.
Right, but to start.
It's so much his brand, and it's like so much sort of a fiber of who he is that a statement I don't think is going to do very much.
I also
to
don't
change
know
anything.
that, white nationalists, if he is going to denounce them, are going to be like, well, Trump's not our guy anymore. They'll be like, well, you know who made him say that. It's the same people that Mel Gibson would tell you made him do it.
I don't know. I think if he actually made a statement now or in the future or whatever, those groups, I would imagine, to publicly denounce. I don't know. I think it would make a difference within certain groups. I don't know.
And R. Scott Brown does point out something that I had read previously, that the shooter was specifically talking about the caravan and it being a Jewish conspiracy. So, I think that, however a mind like that synthesizes anything. One final point I wanted to make on this topic was that the rabbi I believe for the same synagogue, said that he would have welcomed the opportunity to meet with President Trump. And then after he said that, he started getting hate mail. I think that certainly doesn't help either. It's just like...
I don't understand the hate mail
well,
stuff.
yeah, first of all,
the
a
death
rabbi.
threats.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's just like, look, he's still the president. We get it. You can put all the stickers on your car that say "Not my president" that you want to. He's still the president. There is something to be gained from speaking to him and having him hear what you have to say. I understand. Look, a lot of people probably don't want their picture taken with him right now. Not, in the next week. Depending on how the midterms go, maybe there'll be some more photo ops. What would it be on the 7th? But. It's just, those are the sort of things where you read it, it's just like, oh, right, everybody's an asshole. I forget sometimes. It's easy to think that, oh my God, Trump supporters are terrible. And if you're a Trump supporter, you're like, oh, the media's terrible. And no, just everybody's potentially an asshole.
This is... I wonder if sometimes people are a little bit dramatic with their use of the term hate mail, because if a rabbi says, I would like to meet with Trump, and somebody has a feeling about that, and they
he got death threats. So,
that legit. But if people said, I would urge you to reconsider this, he's a whatever, and have some just sharing of their sentiments on the subject, fine. I would hope that that's still okay. Or if you would consider that,
hate mail is of course something that you can say. I was specifically speaking about the death threat tone. Some would say that this show has received hate mail, although I look at everything as a pair of eyes or ears that enjoy the show, and everybody loves it. So, it's a different way to look at it. Before we run out of time, which often happens, I did want to move on to this birthright citizenship, this idea that President Trump is thinking of signing executive order, which, in the post-factual world, he doesn't need to sign it. He just needs to say a week out from an election that he's thinking about it. And, that helps remind the base where he's at on some of these issues, and, could have also the negative effect, though. So I don't quite know if, look, he has people who advise him. At least I think he does. I'm pretty sure Jared. I don't know about anybody. Jared Kushner, not the guy from Subway. He's not really. Well, apparently he was advising Whitey Bulger. But I think that it's just, first of all, and I know it's maybe not strictly a legal issue. Chelsea, can you write an executive order that's like, yeah, that's not going to be true anymore? Or does it have to pass through, does the Supreme Court, what has to happen?
It's a good question. Thank
you. That's the first one of the show.
Doesn't say it anywhere explicitly, but let me ask you this. Can an executive order undo the Second Amendment? I mean, some people would be really pissed off about that. So
my gut reaction would be it can't, but
right.
It can't.
So right,
No.
it cannot. But this is really a two-part analysis. First of all, is it constitutional or not? And what's very interesting about this is that on the surface, just like on the surface of the Second Amendment, it appears to say one thing. In the Second Amendment's case, it appears to say the right to bear arms, period. And in the 14th Amendment, it appears to say you're born here, you're a citizen. But if you actually read the text, there is a little bit room for at least argument. In the Second Amendment, that little bit of text that's in there is the well-regulated militia language. And in the 14th Amendment, it's a language of under the jurisdiction thereof, which makes it seem like, well, maybe this is only applying to legal residents or people who are here lawfully. So somebody could take that to mean that if you're not here lawfully and you have a child, then that child is not given citizenship. But the more important question, I think, is, the timing of this. I at first I was like, oh, this is a distraction. And then I saw a lot of sentiment online about being upset with people who are calling it a distraction. No, he's said things like this and then he's followed through on it. At this point, 7 days before the midterms, it is kind of a distraction. But it's I think for the purpose of what you said, Christian, to remind the base, like, hey, these are the things that we get to do if we stay in power. An executive order, that's not going to fly any more than an executive order could, change separation of church and state. It's just that's not how you do it. But it would be an interesting exercise for the courts to see how they deal with that if he were to try it.
Right, and hardly a legal scholar, but Paul Ryan has said that Trump can't make these kind of changes without Congress or a new constitutional amendment. But it hasn't stopped Lindsey Graham from promising that he's like, I'm going to get right on that bill. It's all of a sudden like
Lindsey Graham is slowly losing his mind. He's just spiraling.
He just woke up a month ago.
It was like McCain is out of the picture, and now he doesn't have McCain keeping him in line a little bit.
Voice
Now
of
he's
reason.
now he's become a little bit weird. It's weird. But to go back to the executive order, no, it's not constitutional, because if we're putting in saying it's constitutional, then basically you're saying that Trump is a dictator and then he can make executive orders on anything he wants.
And isn't this the guy who talked so much?
Trump isn't a dictator yet. I just wanted to
but
let's put the
that's
pin
what
in
I'm
that.
saying.
Anyway.
If you're saying that you can do an executive order to that and essentially change what the meaning of the Constitution, which of course is ironic, given that the GOP is very textualist when it comes to the Constitution, but now when it's something they don't like, again, it comes back to, we can do an executive order and change what we think the meaning is.
Or the part about Obama did executive orders,
Too
and
many.
there were, oh my God, this is just lawlessness,
Right.
and then now Trump does it, and it's just kosher.
But the fascinating thing is not even just Paul Ryan, but I have some hardcore friends and family members back in South that are just Trump supporters to the nth degree, and even some of them had posted today that you can't just do an executive order. Even these people that are the biggest Trump supporters are even saying you can't do it.
Wow, that's
good to hear.
What a great day for facts.
Right, like you cannot unilaterally change these type of things. But I think, like you're saying with the whole Lindsey Graham thing, it's a way of putting it out there, the base, and then saying this is what I'd like to do. Now go and do it, Congress, and make it happen, kind of thing. Which, going back to what you're saying earlier, Chelsea, it's even though there might have been some debate, it's been a conclusion for many years now that is the standard, that if a baby is born in the U.S., just like if someone's vacationing here and they came over, and yes, we've heard the whole thing with China having anchor babies and bring them over, and there's been a lot of debate about it over the years, but it's been mainly looked at as this is done, this is how it's been happened, and the reverse, if you're a U.S. citizen and you're overseas, like John McCain, and you're born in Panama Canal Zone or somewhere outside of the U.S., you're still considered a U.S. citizen because your parents are U.S. citizens, even if you're born in France or Canada or anywhere else.
This isn't an issue that comes before the Supreme Court very often, and as far as I could see, the most recent case that speaks exactly to this is from 1898. It was a case about Chinese immigrants who had a child, and the immigrants were here lawfully, and so the child was given citizenship. But there's nothing since then, and clearly we have a different Supreme Court.
Right.
But this isn't something that comes up every day.
No,
and
it's
so there's
something-
not a whole lot.
I
for
actually
us.
don't know the answer to this. So what happens if, say, you're Mexican and you're vacationing in the UK or France, and you give birth? What are the policies of other countries?
No, we're like the
I
only
guess?
one that really does
Right.
it.
Usually,
Yeah.
it's the citizenship of your parents.
Right.
Right. That's kind of what I thought.
Yes.
And I have two devices where I could have Googled it, but I just thought it would be easier to talking to the camera. And
But what I've been really surprised to talk to friends about who are from minority, Mexican mostly, that they are like, yeah, we don't really like it when they come over here and start having kids and applying for all these benefits. And it's like, wow, okay. I was a little bit surprised, a lot surprised to hear that. But it's not, it's not something that just, I was going to say crazy white Trump supporters, but I should probably not use the word crazy when I'm here trying to tamper down.
no,
that
Kanye would
rhetoric.
be offended if you said crazy white Trump supporters.
It's
'Cause he's
also
only one of those
minorities,
things.
and I was pretty surprised by that. But I think that what some of that comes from is working class people who see that people just come here and then are able to get all Medi-Cal and all sorts of stuff. I think there would be less resentment if we all had Medi-Cal or Medicare for all, something like that. Then we wouldn't be so resentful of people who are getting that.
Absolutely, and of course, there's people that are taking advantage of that, like we said, with anchor babies that are coming over for the explicit purpose of taking advantage of this and being able to have a baby here, so that it is an official
I've
U.S.
heard
citizen.
of people do it from all different countries, come from Singapore, and
That's what I'm saying. A lot of definitely.
So it's not just we think of it as stopping migrants from south of the border from having kids here, but
All
it
over the world.
really is all over the world because there's an entire industry, companies that hosts women. Come, here in your 7th month, and then come have your baby here. I know personally somebody who flew here just to have her baby here.
Right.
So
No, it's a whole business. So, I mean, there is definitely room for negotiation on that kind of thought process. However, the way he's going about doing it is not right. And the fact is and it goes back to our roots as being a land of immigrants, and that we were open to the land of immigrants before that was abused. And the fact is, if you had a kid here, and at the time that when we were, this became sort of the de facto kind of rule that everyone lived by, it was because we wanted more immigrants here and at that time period. And it was like, okay, let's, if they're born here, they're U.S. citizens, and let's, Americanize immigrants and their families. That's how it kind of started in that sense.
And I can understand people being upset at it's being exploited and taken advantage of. And I too can have a reaction of like, oh, that's not cool to just knowingly do something. But if we add up the cost to us, what harm it's causing, and I am sure there are valid points for harms and costs that it does have, but there are so many other more costlier, wasteful, damaging things going on that need our attention first, that it's frustrating that this would be something that we would focus on. I mean, you want to spend less on immigrants coming here? I'll trade you. We'll match that by removing some of spending from military. That these are the kinds of compromises I'm willing to have, because
That's going to anger people.
well, sure, but don't tell me that you want to stop this because it's costing us money and then waste money in other areas.
Right.
Or if you wanted to pitch that idea in red states, say instead of we'll take money away from military, we will take money away from reducing carbon emissions, and then they'll be like, oh, okay,
Exactly.
we don't care
Yeah,
about that. Hey,
exactly.
sorry, what were you going to say, Tam?
I was going to say, though, what you were saying earlier about people being probably in working class communities being upset over people abusing our benefit system, and maybe if we all had Medicare or whatever, people wouldn't be so upset. But I do think that's another example, though, of what you were saying about money. You always want more, because I know Republicans. I have a friend who I know several people who are receiving government benefits, and they are so anti-welfare, so anti anybody receiving, and it's like, you're living off the government and you're telling other people not to.
It's the other, like we were talking about with.
So people see what they want to see. So
we do only have a few minutes here, 4 to be specific. So as we are a week out from the midterm elections, I would like to turn to Scott in a moment. And I don't need the specific numbers, but some of your interpretations of things you've seen. And as I'm talking about the midterms, that's a great time to mention that we will be on the air live next Tuesday night. You will definitely be able to find us at 10 Pacific. There's a chance you might be able to find us at 9 Pacific for 2 hours, but we will definitely be on at 10. Make sure you follow us. We'll give our Twitter handles out at the end of the show, or there's always at Trump Report ABTV. We'll make sure to put the time on there. But next Tuesday we'll be on at night, because if we did it at this time, I don't believe a single poll would be closed at that point, so there wouldn't be as much to talk about.
A few would be, but on the East Coast.
At 7? At 7 Eastern. I didn't even realize that. All right, well, but still, none of the ones that anybody cares about. Yeah, I said it. I said it. I didn't mean it. So, Scott, your assessment as you look at the map before it's all colored in a week from tonight.
Well, I mean, just from first impressions, the nice thing is that early voting is up as compared to 2014. So that's a really great thing overall. I mean, I would just encourage, again, people to get out there and vote between now and when we're back next Tuesday. That's incredibly important. If we're to look at it, it still looks like the House would go Democratic. The Senate is a much harder path. That would probably stay
I would
Republican.
say nothing I've seen indicates that the Senate has any chance of going Democratic.
But, it was always going to be difficult because of the way it was set up. And even 2020 will be hard for Democrats to take control of the Senate, too, even though they'll be more in favor. It's still not just the way it's set up. We have a lot of Democrats in red states right now that are having to defend themselves. That being said, I think another thing that's often overlooked is the governor races and the AG races, and some of those down the line that are going to be very important for redistricting in 2020 and also to kind of replenish the Democratic bench. And we see a lot of states, especially the bigger populated states, that are trending Democratic in this cycle for governor. And so that's going to be one of the ones I'm going to be really looking at closely, because that's going to be kind of shaping these states as we move into 2020, and also if they're going to be less open to Trump and policies out of Washington during the next 2 years. So Democrats, I think, are going to pick up quite a few seats of governorships, at least 7, maybe even more. And like I said, I think the House
that makes it such a tiny dent, because aren't we behind 1,000?
No, I'm saying Democratic governors, so 7 seats.
Where's Florida and Georgia right now as far as
Georgia's about tied, and Florida's been leading with the Democratic Andrew Gillum the whole time since the primaries.
To just fast forward to a week from tonight, we'll be talking about Ted Cruz getting reelected, right? I mean, there's... don't look at me like that. No. What's going to happen?
Likely.
I don't like you and your predictions.
Beto, you shouldn't have sent out so many damn text messages.
On October 1st, I said the Red Sox would win the World Series. Look, I can't help it. I just know, okay?
No, but but the thing that's interesting is the Midwest is really trending back Democratic. It's the most Democratic out of the whole regions of the country right now, and those are the ones that helped give Trump his unusual path to Electoral College victory, and they're going way back to the other direction democratically for governors, for Congress, for Senate. Democrats are heavily in the lead in the upper Midwest, so Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Ohio's a little closer, Pennsylvania. All those states are trending very Democratic this cycle, so that's good.
I don't feel like I heard you say Texas in there, so don't Beto on Beto.
What? Wait, why? What? Please.
Because people vote for what is comfortable to them, and even if it's a guy who looks like Count Chocula, who whose father clearly tried to have Castro killed, they always vote to reelect the same people. And it's Texas. Anybody from Texas except for Brooke, who's here sometimes. But apart from her, people from Texas, they're like, we're not going to vote for. Yes, in Austin, they're going to vote for Democrats.
And Dallas, and Houston.
But anybody's ever been to Texas? There's so much Texas beyond that.
But the bottom line is, if people get out and vote, that's what's going to change things. And already Dallas has broken their record the other day from their early voting record that they had in 2014. So the bottom line is, get out and vote. And statistically, when there's a higher vote turnout, it usually does help Democrats. So not saying never is never. There could very well be a chance for the Senate, but it's going to be...
Christian's going to be wrong one of these days, and I wonder if it's going to be...
Look, we didn't make a graphic that said the Hillary report, all right?
But Arizona and Nevada could shift to Democrats. there's a good opportunity for that. For Senate
that
pickups.
seems like a little bit more.
Phil Bredesen is right there in Tennessee. I mean, so there's a lot that could trend in the Democrats' favor over the past week. So it's
just
really going to be
today,
turnout.
Claire McCaskill, Missouri, who's up for Missouri Democrat up for election.
Incumbent.
She made a statement today about against immigrants, the immigrant caravan. So that's a red state Democrat, saying what they need to say in order to get elected in those states.
It makes me sad, but
I'm interested in some of the ones closer to home for us. We've got Katie Hill, who is trying to, we've got the last Republican seat in Los Angeles County is held by Steve Knight. And Katie Hill is perhaps going to win that. And then down south, we'll see if Putin's favorite congressman,
Putin's puppet,
Rohrabacher, stays in. So. Lots of fun.
I'm excited about the local ones too.
We'll talk a lot about all of this next week. As I mentioned, we'll definitely be on at 10 Pacific, maybe at 9 Pacific. So look for us. We'll tweet it out. And if you want to see tweets from me, you can follow me at Christian DMZ. That's Twitter and Instagram. Chelsea, where do people find you?
At Chelsea Galicia.
And Tamra.
You can find me at HeyTamra _ on Twitter.
And S-Man.
And you can find me at SMan80 and get out there and vote.
That's right. It doesn't matter who you vote for on Election Day, just so long as you vote.
Actually, it does.
Just so long as you vote for the Trump report with your eyes and ears. That's what matters so much more than anything else. Anyway, thanks so much, everybody. It was a very lively conversation in the chat. I couldn't really incorporate it into the show as much as I wanted to, so thanks, everybody. And we will see you again next Tuesday night. At least at 10 o'clock, maybe at 9. See everybody then.
Bye.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.